India's trade standoff with the U.S. What you need to know. India remains unshaken as the U.S.-India trade deadline approaches. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite mounting pressure, New Delhi appears unfazed as the August 1st deadline looms, when tariffs on American goods are set to jump to 26%. Analysts say this calm attitude reflects a calculated strategy to protect its most sensitive industries. In a recent move, the U.S. and Japan finalized a trade deal that addressed key issues like access for American cars and farm products. India, like Japan, has resisted opening its markets further to U.S. agricultural goods to shield its farmers, a group that holds significant political power. This stance was reinforced by India's recent trade pact with the UK, which successfully safeguarded its critical agricultural sectors from tariff concessions. Indeed, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal acknowledged the sensitivity of the agricultural sector in an interview with CNBC. "We are always very sensitive to the interests of our farmers and micro, small, and medium enterprises, and will ensure our areas of concern are well protected," he said. This resolve has set a precedent for India's approach to trade negotiations, signaling its willingness to prioritize domestic interests over immediate economic gains. However, as the deadline nears, analysts note that Washington also has its own motivations. Strategically, the U.S. sees India as a vital partner in shaping the Indo-Pacific region. The U.S. has little interest in alienating India, which is a strong partner that can influence the global balance of power, said Harsh Pant of the Observer Research Foundation. This perspective underscores the complex dynamics at play in the U.S.-India relationship. India's role as a strategic hedge against China is another key factor. With the U.S. focused on countering China's global dominance, India represents a potential alternative for manufacturing. Analysts argue that shifting production to India could serve as a compromise between U.S. and Indian interests. For instance, the U.S. might control high-tech manufacturing, while India handles lower-cost labor, creating a complementary partnership that limits China's influence. Beyond economics, India's involvement in the BRICS group, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, adds another layer of complexity. The bloc aims to challenge Western-led economic systems and reduce U.S. dollar dominance. However, U.S. President Trump has threatened additional tariffs on countries aligning with BRICS, including India. Despite this, India has managed to avoid direct confrontation, with Trump hinting that the U.S.-India trade deal is nearing completion. Within BRICS, India faces internal pressures from China, which views New Delhi as a rival for leadership. This dynamic makes India a valuable counterbalance to China in the group, potentially benefiting the U.S. Meanwhile, Trump's skepticism toward BRICS' alternative currency plans could become a bargaining chip for India, as it works to convince the U.S. that it is not aligned with such initiatives. India's broader strategy includes diversifying trade partnerships. While negotiating with the U.S., it is also advancing talks with the EU, Maldives, and other nations. This multi-alignment approach reflects India's growing confidence as a global power. By maintaining strong ties with the U.S. while exploring other options, India gains leverage in negotiations and reduces reliance on any single partner. As Sarang Shidore of the Quincy Institute noted, this strategy mirrors India's vision of multilateralism and supporting the global South. What does this mean for India's future role in global trade? As the world becomes more interconnected, India's ability to navigate competing interests will determine its success. Will it continue to prioritize its own interests, or will it find ways to align with powerful partners like the U.S.? The answer may lie in how India balances its ambitions with the realities of global diplomacy. India-U.S. trade deal. Piyush Goyal's optimism and key challenges. India-U.S. trade pact. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal hails remarkable advances in negotiations. Imagine a scenario where India and the U.S., two economic powerhouses, are on the brink of a groundbreaking trade agreement. That's precisely the optimistic picture painted by India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. In a significant announcement made in London following the historic signing of a free trade agreement with the UK, Goyal declared that India is witnessing remarkable progress in its trade negotiations with the United States. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite this positive outlook, Both Washington and Delhi have missed multiple deadlines to seal the deal. The pressure is on, as U.S. President Donald Trump has set a firm deadline of August 1st for India and other nations to ink a trade pact or face substantial tariffs. Trump initially imposed a 26% tariff on Indian goods on April 2, part of a broader trade strategy. These tariffs were temporarily halted until July 9th, but the U.S. later extended the deadline to August 1st. Indian officials have made numerous visits to the U.S. to iron out the finer details of the agreement. Last week, Trump echoed Goyal's optimism, stating that the two nations were very close to finalizing an interim trade pact. The ultimate goal is to secure a bilateral deal by the year's end. In a conversation with Reuters on Thursday, Goyal reiterated his confidence, expressing hope that India and the U.S. would conclude a highly impactful partnership. When grilled about India's primary concern, lower tariffs on agricultural and dairy products, Goyal remained diplomatic, stating that negotiations are best left to the negotiation room. However, he hinted that India might still pursue a comprehensive deal if smaller, sector-specific agreements can be achieved. Goyal conveyed similar assurance to Bloomberg, expressing his belief that a deal would be reached before the looming deadline. Yet, the path to resolution remains shrouded in mystery, with key issues having stalled negotiations for months. Washington has long sought greater access to India's agricultural sector, viewing it as a lucrative, untapped market. But India has staunchly defended this sector, citing concerns over food security, the livelihoods of farmers, and the interests of millions of small-scale agriculturalists. Until recently, the U.S. was India's top trading partner, with bilateral trade amounting to $190 billion. Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had ambitiously set a target to more than double this figure to $500 billion. India has already slashed tariffs on various goods, including bourbon whiskey and motorcycles. However, the U.S. continues to grapple with a $45 billion trade deficit with India, a figure Trump is determined to reduce. And this is the part most people miss. The intricacies of these negotiations could reshape the economic landscape for both countries. Do you think a balanced trade agreement is achievable? Or will one side have to make significant concessions? Share your thoughts in the comments. India's Goyal optimistic about U.S. trade deal. Fantastic progress. In a world where trade agreements can make or break economies, India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is expressing optimism about the ongoing trade negotiations with the United States, describing the progress as fantastic. During a recent panel discussion at the World Economic Forum 2022 held in the picturesque alpine resort of Davos, Switzerland, Goyal conveyed his confidence that India would receive favorable treatment from President Donald Trump. Back in April, Trump had threatened to impose a hefty 26% tariff on imports from India, but he decided to delay this action to facilitate discussions. This temporary reprieve is set to expire on August 1st, yet India has not yet received an official tariff notification, unlike over 20 other nations that have been informed. Earlier this week, two sources from the Indian government indicated that the chances of reaching an interim trade agreement before the looming deadline have diminished. This setback is largely due to ongoing disagreements regarding tariff reductions on essential agricultural and dairy products. In an interview conducted during his visit to London, Goyal downplayed the significance of strict deadlines in trade negotiations, while maintaining an upward outlook on the discussions with the U.S. He stated, "We are making fantastic progress with the United States, and I sincerely hope we can finalize a partnership that is highly beneficial for both parties." When questioned about potential conflicts with Washington concerning agricultural issues, Goyal remarked that negotiations take place behind closed doors. He emphasized that India is open to achieving smaller, sector-specific victories rather than insisting on a comprehensive agreement if it means gaining preferential market access over its competitors. All options remain on the table, and we will observe how the situation unfolds. What truly matters is securing preferential market access compared to our peers, he explained. Goyal expressed his belief that India, being the first nation to initiate negotiations, would be granted special and preferential treatment. On a related note, Trump recently announced a trade agreement with Japan that reduces auto tariffs, although discussions regarding pharmaceuticals and semiconductors will be handled separately. Goyal's visit to London follows the signing of a free trade agreement with Britain. which has also negotiated sector-specific tariff relief with the Trump administration. Despite other countries potentially finalizing deals with Trump before India, Goyal remains unfazed by the pressure of deadlines. He stated, "I don't believe that negotiations ever succeed under the constraints of deadlines or preconceived limitations," emphasizing his desire for a mutually beneficial agreement. It is essential to approach negotiations with an open mind and to create a balanced package that ensures fairness for both sides. This situation raises intriguing questions. Will India secure the favorable trade terms it seeks? Or will the complexities of international negotiations hinder progress? Share your thoughts in the comments below.